Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Megan should be here in about a minute or two. She just texted me. Let's do introductions. We'll go around the room and then on Zoom.
Andrea Blum, City of Sisters.
Patty Dare, County Commissioner, Sisters.
Kat Zwicker, Redmond City Councilor.
Daniel Richer, Mayor of LaPine.
Molly Heiss, Neighbor Impact. Eliza Wilson, HLC. Catherine Osborne, Redmond City Council.
James Cook, Oasis Village.
John Lugis, Shepherd's House.
Gwen Wisely, Bethlehem Inn.
And Scott, Neighbor Impact.
Josh Burgess, Central Oregon Civic Action Project. Raj Moore, Head of Property Management.
Steve Robick, CIC, Housing and Homelessness.
Chris Ogren, Houseless Response Analyst with the Coordinated Houseless Response Office.
Mickey Durding, City of Bend.
Eric King, City of Bend.
Great, and we have no one representing the county today because Eric is out of court in Portland and Nick is with his other commitment, his LUBA. So they're having their meeting. So
I can run them
well,
up.
I guess we should have somebody to come in. I'll send her a text. So, okay, great. Online, is there anyone, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are people online.
Is anybody raising their hand to introduce themselves at this moment? No?
Yeah, it's Healthy Democracy.
Yeah, that's Alex, I think.
Okay. All right.
Hi, everyone. Alex Ranieri, Program Co-Director with Healthy Democracy.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other raise hands?
Linda Burr.
Linda? Okay, no other raised hands.
Natalie.
Natalie, would you like to unmute yourself? Okay, well, hopefully we'll have this fixed by public comments at 12:20. And Megan.
Hi, Nate Perkins, Bend City Councilor.
Okay, let's go to item number 2 on our agenda, the minutes and review of the financials. I made a note earlier that we'll get the financials actually dated next time, so we know. It looks like it's through the year of 87% or something. I'm not sure. So we need to do that. Are there any comments on the minutes? They were upgraded again this morning.
I do have a comment.
Okay.
In the notes from our from the last meeting, there was a public comment made and I would like to correct some of the inaccurate information provided and perhaps answer some questions were raised during that time. I'm on the executive committee of the MAC group and am proud of the work that Central Oregon MAC has accomplished in a short time.
Oh, somebody please shut the door. Thanks, Catherine.
There were various concerns brought up by the public comment in our last meeting, statements made that insinuated that there were conflicts of interest that may impede the MAC funding process. I wanted to share that while Tammy Bainey facilitates some of the MAC meetings, she does not vote or make decisions around funding. The MAC group does. Most decisions have been voted on by all MAC members, but at times the membership has delegated votes to the executive committee comprised of the HLC, the region's housing authority, and community action agency. The original request for $84,000 for renovations from the BI to the MAC group was voted on by the whole membership. The executive committee voted by email regarding funding allocations to the BI as it related to rent payments for incoming renters of their rapid rehousing project and staff to support renters. Voting by email is common practice among boards, even this one. This was not in an effort to be less transparent, but to meet our goals around housing people experiencing homelessness rapidly in the tight timeline given by the governor's office. All funding allocations by the MAC group are a reimbursement model. This means that when an organization spends the money, they invoice the MAC to be reimbursed. We pay for staff who are currently working and housing for people who are currently in housing. Data related to how many people are served is closely monitored and submitted to the state of Oregon. Our MAC meetings are open to the public, and we encourage open communication from community partners regarding gaps in the system and in funding. It's common for attendees to express their support for a program, like how Tammy, a former board member for the BI, expressed support for their requests for funding. Just as I have expressed support for funding requests in meetings. Additionally, the public comment from our last meeting insinuated that the MAC had not posted all videos for past meetings on the website, but in fact, all videos are present because the group at times have skipped meetings when we've been in between funding awards. The only way for our community or any community to make progress with the crisis of homelessness is to put our differences aside and work together to house people. We cannot shelter people out of homelessness. This is why the MAC group backed to shelter, shifting from sheltering individuals to providing them housing. We must invest in housing options, and as a provider, I understand how hard it is to shift programs. It can sometimes take time to get to full capacity, and it can be expensive at first with renovations. However, running a housing program is going to be less expensive long-term than running a shelter in our community, and it fills existing gaps that we really need. We need to support programs like the BI, who was willing to see that they needed to shift their program, a really difficult decision, and to fit the need that the community currently has. I appreciate the questions and encourage interested parties to attend the MAC group meetings. They are virtual and open to the public. The next meeting is 10 a.m. next Wednesday.
What date is that? That's May 1st.
Yeah,
At 10 a.m. Okay,
thank you.
so 10 a.m. May 1st for your next MAC meeting, and it's all virtual? Oh. Great, thank you for those. We'll put those into the record. Any other comments on the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes? There were several things in the original minutes that you may have seen, and they have been upgraded prior to this meeting this morning. And I believe that Kristen sent those updates out.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and the chair votes aye. So, all right, fabulous. Okay, so let's now go to the point in time count. Attachment number C with Ben Scott. Thank you, Ben.
Get set up so I can share my screen here. All right, so my name is Ben Scott. I'm the unhoused services data coordinator with Neighbor Impact.
With a raised voice.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Oh, that reminds me, let me tell, we need help. Thanks. Go ahead.
So my name is Ben Scott. I'm the unhoused services data coordinator with Neighbor Impact. Is that better? Okay. And today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 pit count as well as the coordinated entry system. Before I get into the pit count, I wanted to kind of frame our discussion around data and homeless services with kind of a metaphor of the policy makers and the service providers as kind of the caretakers, and the community, the unhoused community, as those that are being provided care. And in order to provide that care, we need to have a relationship with the person we're trying to provide care to. And when we do that at a personal level, that's like a relationship. But if we do that at a kind of community level, that relationship comes down to knowing the community, and we need to know the community through the data. And so kind of using that to frame this discussion, the pit count is a cross-sectional data set. So that's a snapshot. It's a single point in time. It's like a freeze frame from a movie that you pull out. And kind of continuing this metaphor, the pit count, what that is kind of if we look at the caretaker and the cared for relationship, it's kind of like a parent and a child. And I don't want that to be patronizing, but so the pit count is kind of that school picture that we send to the grandparents and they send a check. So it's like we send this picture off to grandpa, grandma HUD, and they send a check. So that's the pit count, and I want us to kind of keep that frame of mind when we look at what we're talking about with the data. You wouldn't want to try to have a parent-child relationship with only snapshots of their school pictures, right? And that more in-depth relationship is how I want to frame the coordinated entry process. So pit count, school picture, coordinated entry is more of our relationship. To start out, this is the continuum-wide data, pit counts over the years. So this is like your on the wall in grandma and grandpa's, you have all those school pictures, which is great. And you can see some change over time. You can pull out these patterns, you can see how.
Ben, can you go back and tell everyone what sheltered ES and sheltered TH means?
Yeah, so sheltered ES is emergency shelter. Sheltered TH is transitional, and the difference being like emergency shelter has been kind of more night by night, shorter term. Transitional is a little bit longer term, and they have it's really meant to transition to a more permanent solution.
So we actually had years when there were not found any unsheltered.
Well, certain
you just
years
weren't counted.
we don't do the count, yeah.
We're not required to do the count every year, but we do.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't mean there
Choose
was
to
zero.
do that, so we have more information.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
We started as a continuum,
Yeah.
choosing to do a full count every year. As you can see there, we've got 21 and forward, we've got a full count. HUD's requirement is that every odd year is a full count. So we choose to use this information to seek a better picture, a more consistent picture over time.
Yeah, I just
Yeah, no, that was a good
misinterpret what that
Yes,
means.
no, don't misinterpret that.
Thank you.
And then these are numbers for Jefferson, Brooke, and Deschutes County
Yes, and Confederated tribes. of
and the
course.
Confederated Tribes.
And if you see the sheltered numbers, we have way more people sheltered this year than we did previous years, and that's because the investment in shelter locally, we've expanded shelter locally.
Do you know how much we've spent?
In all, I don't, I know, like, I could get the information related to the MAC funding, and I think that's probably, but then, you know, the city of Bend, there's other investments, city of Redmond.
Sorry, are we okay with this slide?
Yes.
So this is that same data, and this is, you can see those zeros that are unsheltered. But this is the data smooth, so you can really pick out the trends, and those zeros kind of smooth out. And as you can see, it's continuum wide, the trend is increasing. I don't think this is new news. This next slide is the past 3 years, pig count broken out by sheltered and unsheltered, over by county or 3 counties. And the point I wanted to make here, as Eliza was pointing out, our shelter count is increasing, right, year over year from 2022, 2023, 2024. We've invested in the shelters, and we've increased the capacity. Overall, the trend for Deschutes County is, 2022 was 1143, 2023 was 1467, and 2024 this year is 1432. So overall, Deschutes County in our pit count decreased slightly. But that kind of aggregate number, there's more to break out, and that's why I wanted to show this, was the increase in shelter count, but also this kind of fluctuation in the unsheltered, and that's really what's contributing to that overall dip from last year in the overall count. But when we look at that, we can look at kind of the layer underneath the data and look at how many people were involved for Deschutes County in collecting data. And when we look at that level, there were 61 people administering surveys in 2022 and in 2024. And in 2023, that year where we were up a little bit in that shelter count, we had 67. And so that kind of tracks along with, you know, suggests that this count still may be an undercount if our trend is trending with the number of people involved in administering the survey. And that's why I wanted to include Cook County as well. This big increase in the unsheltered count here, I don't think is due to a huge influx of homeless people into Cook County. I think they did a fantastic job of preparing for what they did this year and really getting people out to do that count. And so I just wanted to highlight that some of these counts are tied to capacity and how many people we have out in the field conducting that. The unsheltered count, or the sheltered count, is less so because that's relying on our normal data system. Any questions on the slide?
Okay, so you're saying that we actually have 35 fewer people in Deschutes County that were in the count, according, if you said 1467 prior year and then 1432.
Yes.
But yet we are told by so many people that a lot of people have actually been placed, let's say, in an apartment building. They're still getting services, perhaps from state parking in Redmond, but those people would no longer be in this count, correct?
Yeah, exactly. They would.
So, yeah, even though
If
we
they're-
placed like 85 people from, like Rick's number is easy to remember, 85 of his people have gone on somewhere. And yet our count only went down 35.
Well, this is a single night, so I
Right.
don't know if there's not a one-to-one between those two numbers. We're looking at different timeframes, I think, and that's why I'm not sure where the 85 number.
That's a number that Rick gives out, his success
But
rate. of
people,
people-
I think it was become homeless.
I think
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
the percentage,
As
and
well.
I think he's had 35 placed in permanent housing.
Well,
I think that's the
They
number.
could have not been unhoused as of the 23 pit
Right.
count, become homeless, worked with MCBD or MVCD, gotten housed before this pit count.
Right.
So 35 of those people were in that time frame, but the other 50 folks maybe were in and out.
Oh, and I do have a question about Ben. Does that include China Hat's numbers and Dirt World? So does Ben, all those numbers go into Ben then? Even though
Yes,
they're not
yes.
actually in the city?
Yes,
Okay,
that's how we've done it this year.
Yeah, just like sisters numbers.
right, Sisters numbers are all from the forest around Sisters.
But the capacity, I think, speaking to what Ben said around, we had more people counting in Deschutes County in 2023, and which is perhaps why we were able to capture more surveys. Capacity is tough because we have providers doing this, essentially volunteering their time, instead of doing their normal day-to-day, doing surveys instead, or having, trying to get volunteers to help with this. And so we know that we have at least this many people, but as far as like China Hat, while there was multiple attempts to do counts in China Hat, it's a tough place to count because people are out in the trees and so those larger encampments are tough to count. And also the count is usually conducted during business hours. And a lot of folks work. And so we wouldn't be capturing folks who are at work, doing those surveys if people are not in the camps, is what I'm saying.
We also have to keep in mind that the point in time count surveys are voluntary and self-reported. And it's really important to note that, we have all had kiddos that have not had that ongoing regular relationship with their grandparents. And if they see them at a family function, they're kind of hesitant. And so we can use that same analogy that Ben created. And maybe folks are working with a new provider, they're sort of engaged, but they're not, and they just don't have that level of trust. So some of the folks that we would hope to count choose to decline, and we have to respect their human dignity and privacy.
When you go to an encampment where there are normally two people, one person is there, the other person is off working, can you take information from that? So
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's important to note because it's because I think there has been like misinformation around the count, that we're just kind of we're just telling people, assuming that they're homeless, or that we hear that people are homeless, so we count them, but we can't do it that way. We have to have a conversation with the person, and or if we're seeing them in the encampment, and we might be able to, if we see that they're staying there and they're there, but they don't want to participate, we can also do a tally at that moment. We can't hear from other people or anything like that.
So do you have any sense of from the people who may regularly go into an area and service that area, how big the undercount is?
That's where coordinated entry
Yeah.
comes into play.
Okay, so if we wait for the presentation, we might.
Question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know, small question. I would imagine, I wouldn't ever want to trample on anybody's rights and dignity, but could we not at some point just mark declined and then kind of say in a side box over here, these were the number of people that when we were out doing this that declined without a reference to anything else?
You can do the observational tally as long as the person that's out there doing that collection is the one that observed that person.
Yeah, but I think that would bring to bear a number of people. And you could offset the count by a differential of, we had this many declines, so if we use this number as a differential and you use it statistically across the base, would that not make sense?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, just asking.
So
we do that. We do that.
is
We just can't count
essentially-
people that aren't there.
Yeah, that is essentially what the observation tally is the person has to observe them, know that they're homeless, they can deny to give any information.
Does this show in this number?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay,
that's what I wanna know.
Dan, did you have a question?
I just have a quick question. According to the chart, if we look at Jefferson, Deschutes and Crook, we move that direction, okay? Is there any correlation between our sheltered and unsheltered in the amount of services that are provided in those counties? If we look at the Jefferson, we see that there's kind of a stable amount of sheltered people and a stable amount of unsheltered people. And then as we move to Deschutes, we notice that we've gained shelters and decreased unsheltered people. So we've transitioned people from one to the other. But when we get to Crook County, everything was very stable, and then we had an uptick in unsheltered people. So does this mean that there was more services provided there, but not more shelters?
I think Ben already spoke to that,
Yeah.
but in context, one of the things that we're seeing with some of the MAC group investments and just the capacity building that we're doing in service providers, we have a much more robust effort in Crook County to get out and do outreach and engagement and counting of those unsheltered folks. So before, when it looks like it was level, it was just that there was a lack of capacity
We
to
weren't
get
counting.
out to count those folks. So the point in time count has numerous issues around accuracy because it's that snapshot, because it's constrained by capacity. And one of the problems that is coming up, and the reason that HUD has implemented coordinated entry suggestions, et cetera, is that when you look at that snapshot and you're constrained, especially in our geographical area, our service region is 15,000 square miles. There are places we can't get to, or we don't have necessarily BLM and Forest Service that have space to go out there at that time. We've done a lot of planning and engagement with them, and the willingness and the interest is certainly there. But there are times that you just don't have capacity. And when you look at the decrease in numbers of people participating in counting, that has a direct correlation there. So one of the things that, you know, like the point time count has always been touted as this magical number. In reality, it's not. And that's why we're shifting to by name list, coordinated entry, that actual service provider engagements with these folks day in and day out. That's a more accurate picture. And this is, you know, the Crook County picture looks like, oh my word, we need to direct all the resources to Crook County because they've got this huge.
Yeah, I don't
increase in
think that
unsheltered.
answered my question at all.
Oh, okay,
I think
sorry.
that my question was, are more services being provided in Crook County that are drawing unsheltered people to there? Or have we just located more unsheltered people that we had not located before?
There's actually an investment in outreach in Crook County that happened as a result of the MAC group funding, and that's what you're seeing right
So
there.
they can go out and count people, yeah.
Well, that's where I was
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
I was wondering if we're just locating more people or if actually we're.
I think last year we
Think about
had
it, you
a,
know,
We
we-
created
like a-
capacity.
yeah, we had a handful of surveys in Crook County last year, and partially it was,
I know.
one of my staff that lives there.
Okay,
So,
Ben,
yeah.
we need to go on because we are,
I
do have a time.
I do have a quick, before we move on, you know, we talk about the pit count and it's not a magical number, but it's the best that we have. And, you know, something that is supposed to be better is the quality by name list. And I do understand that, you know, we had a cohort that went through the process and it seems like it sort of fizzled down, due to capacity issues from people who are incredibly hardworking, and was hoping that because it is a better way to count people and to really fully understand you know, that their situation, was hoping that in the letter that we write to the HLC and Neighbor Impact about wanting data, is if we could ask the question, I'm asking this to the CHRO board, if we could ask the question of how we can help to help move that process along again, so that it doesn't fizzle out. I was hoping that I could get some consent from the CHRO board that we add that to the data letter that we're sending out.
And I would just offer that CHRO staff have been attending the Built for Zero meetings the past couple months. There is a bit of a lull right now. The project manager assigned to our community has turned out, and the nonprofit Community Solutions that helps facilitate that program is sourcing a new one, but just wanted to offer that CHRO staff have been attending those meetings and are committed to continuing to attend those, given the you know, the importance of improving the data picture.
Yes, data. Yeah. Ben.
Okay. So this slide is kind of that same format as before, without the unsheltered, sheltered breakout, but just the pig count by city and year for the past 3 years. I don't really have much more narrative around this one. This is just kind of numbers here and visualization of what's going on. So if you have any questions, if not, we can move on.
Yes, I mean, the good news is Redmond and Ben were declining down. So, yes. So the next one, the age distribution, what happened to people over 64?
So I did fix that. So that was a test. You passed.
Well done.
I know, like, I know there are people over 64.
Yeah. So I kind of, in cracking that, I shuffled some of this, but I will get to that. Gender distribution first, just generally slightly higher male population, kind of a 60-40 breakdown of the overall homeless population. And this is all Deschutes County specific now. Any questions on gender? So the age distribution in the packet, it is missing 65 plus. Apologies for that. I was able to correct that this morning. Yeah, so for the age distribution, I also made a note of countywide, just the baseline population, and we see 14% of our homeless population is under 18. And the actual population breakdown for Deschutes County is 18.7%. And the 65 plus overall homeless population is only 5.2%, and the overall Deschutes County population is 21.4. So we're a little bit closer on our under 18 to what the actual county population is. But overall, the 65 plus is less than the general county age distribution. But that being said, I think I'll leave that. Any questions?
Yeah, did the number of unaccompanied youth go down this year or?
You know, I don't actually know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't
I'm-
actually have that
Okay.
either right now. That would be something we could pull from HMIS. The pit is a little bit harder when we look at year over year. So if you've noticed, the things I have done year over year have been very big picture, or things that I've been able to pull from other people's presentations. And that's because there's so much manual data work that goes into preparing these numbers. If I didn't prepare them, it's hard to like trace back other people's work.
I think just as a, thought, I think we would all be very interested to see the unaccompanied youth numbers, if you could, I hate to give you the extra work, but to extrapolate that out by 30.
You could put it on the correction packet with the 65 showing up.
Okay.
You could consolidate that would be helpful.
And I might have something on hand for that. We've been working with the YHDP, so okay.
Yeah.
All right, here is our race distribution, and this is I apologize for this figure too. This is not a very intuitive or viewer friendly figure. We can look at both age and I will put this in the updated packet with the age corrected. This is something I added this morning as well. So this is for our homeless population. The previous slide had things broken out by sheltered, unsheltered. I don't know that that's as useful right now. It is an interesting question to ask within like what types of counts we're seeing racial breakdowns, but this is just the overall count. So,
And this is just Deschutes County?
Yeah.
Okay.
and again, we can look at like overall Deschutes County compared to the homeless population, and for white in the homeless population, that 82% of the homeless population is white, whereas Deschutes County, we're at 85.8% white. Homeless population is 6.6% Hispanic, whereas Deschutes County 8.8. The homeless population is 2.9% American Indian, Alaska Native, or Indigenous, and that compared to the overall county population of 1.1%.
Almost double.
Would you
Any-
like that built into this slide that to add that?
Yes,
The percentage of population for
That
the
would be
county?
very nice, thank you.
This is good because it's gonna be presented to the commissioners and it's gonna be perfect when you get to us, right, guys?
This is just a warm up.
Yes, this is the warm up today.
Yeah, I appreciate your feedback. It does help me kind of know what's relevant to people.
So really, if we can go into the coordinated interest system, if there is no other feedback for this.
There's the time in Central Oregon, which I think that's really interesting. Important information to have.
Yeah, so
Didn't-
I can touch
didn't
on
do
that
so I
quickly.
didn't do-
I'm in Central Oregon. This is. So there is a caveat here, and the caveat to this slide is that there's a large percentage of unknown as well. This question is quite a ways down our survey list. So I don't think that it's people intentionally not answering this question. I think it's a question that gets answered. It falls in line with the trend we see overall with just completeness the further along in the survey we see. But for those who did answer 10 years or more, it's 45% of the population. 5 to 10 is 17%, 1 to 5 is 23%, and less than 1 is only 50%. And then that is with the caveat of around 45% missing information for this.
45% is missing.
Didn't answer.
And that would be good, those percentages would be helpful too, because there's no way to
Yeah.
show percentages on it.
So that's 85% over 20 years.
This is an excellent tool to combat that. We have all these services, so we're bringing all these folks, we're attracting homelessness to our area.
Well, Measure 110 did its share of attracting people coming across, because I've met it. They've come across states to be here. And hopefully with the recriminalization that message will get out there eventually.
As unhoused people as well as housed people came.
Correct.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just unhoused.
And they came into our house and then they weren't. Okay,
Okay, real quick, just top, causes of homelessness, unemployment, couldn't afford rent, fleeing domestic violence, kicked out, and eviction. The percentage, so the number is the number of people in Deschutes County who selected one of these. And the percent is the percentage of everyone who answered this question, included that, they could select multiple. Any questions before we get into coordinated entry?
so actually a lot of people didn't answer that question.
Yeah, a lot didn't, yeah. And that's another one that's, so there's the core questions that HUD were mandated to provide to HUD. And then there's the added questions, and always with added questions, because they're further down, they get less complete. Okay, if there's not any other questions, I'll get into coordinated entry.
Great, thank you.
So the coordinated entry system is an approach to coordination and management of crisis response systems, resources that allow users to make consistent decisions from available information to efficiently and effectively connect people to interventions that will rapidly end their homelessness. I will not just read from the slide anymore, so that's just kind of the stock language that comes from the HUD documentation. This is something that's required by our major funding sources, so our continuum of care grant and our emergency solutions grant that comes from HUD. And in general, it's just that there are certain elements they're looking for, and we'll get into that, but kind of in my mind, generally what we're looking at is more of a client-centric approach where the client is centered in the whole process versus a provider-centric where clients are coming to individual providers. So we're really trying to coordinate our process. So why use coordinated entry? Aside from it being mandated for some of those major funding sources, it improves our communication if we're all working on the same process. And through that coordinated process, we're preventing duplication of services. So in order to kind of match resources to clients, there needs to be some level of assessment, and rather than having every single provider do that assessment, force the client to answer a battery of questions anytime they come in for something, we're trying to limit that to one instance that kind of captures their state and their vulnerability and their needs. And then that assessment can be used by the entire community. And by doing that, we're also simplifying the client's access to those services through that kind of centralized entry point into the system. You have access to not just a single provider's resources, but the entire community.
You mean like when we go from Summit to St. Charles and we have to redo everything all over again? Because, yeah, okay, yes, it would be nice if the entire service industry was that way.
Yeah. It helps us prioritize our vulnerable households. We have limited resources, so if we have kind of a centralized entry point, we can do a better job of matching those resources to clients in an appropriate way, in a kind of needs-based fashion. And the hope of all of this is to improve our outcomes. So if we're linking clients to appropriate resources, then ideally our outcomes will be better as well. So these are the core elements of coordinated entry, and you might have seen kind of hints of these as I talked on the last slides. But access, it's how people can get into the system. How do people learn about the system? Are providers advertising, like this is your process for getting enrolled in our coordinated system? Assessment, which is our process of gathering the information about that individual to try to find, what are their barriers to housing, what are their needs, what would be an appropriate where are they, so that we can look at what resources they might be good for them. Prioritization, so because we have limited resources and much more need than we have capacity to meet, we need some way of prioritizing individuals either based on need or length of time homeless. There are different ways we can do that, but I think this is one of the elements. And then finally, the referral process. So once they've accessed the system, then assessed, then put into a prioritization list, their name has come up, then they're referred to that resource, and then it's up to them to accept or decline. So this is just a nice picture, a little visualization of these different core elements and kind of some things that might like access, we have a phone line, that's one way of doing it. You can also do it through brick and mortar or your street outreach. Assessments, there are different assessment tools that we use depending on what we're trying to assess for. Prioritization, different resources will have different prioritization schemes. And then finally making that referral on to the service or resource.
Ben, quick question, because a lot of our unhoused are a little bit nomadic and sometimes they come across different providers. when you're doing that initial intake, is it a single source intake? Let's say they end up at either Shepherd's House or maybe Safe Parking. And that's where the intake starts and they're filling out this information to get into the system. Do they have to continually go back to that provider to stay within system or? Good question. Or do they get shepherded to the next step where they can receive help?
No, so this is all like very abstract, like framework of what is coordinated entry, but like in reality, what our coordinated entry system looks like is within HMIS, within our data system, each service provider has a project, and it depends on what the project is, but for example, if it's a shelter, they do an entry, and then when they leave, they'll do an exit, so they're enrolled in this project. Coordinated entry within the data system has its own project, so that when someone is assessed, they're entered into that project within our data system, and that project is visible by the entire continuum, so that if someone goes to JBRJ and they get assessed there,
That's where,
the folks at Bethlehem Inn can see that assessment and know that they're enrolled in coordinated entry and that they're working in the system.
That's essentially where we build their story, so they don't have to retell it over and over and over again.
So we have several people that provide services around in Sisters of one kind or another. They're not part of that system at all.
There was a conversation yesterday
Okay.
with Charlene and
Uh-huh.
Louis, or Lou,
Lou, yeah.
about engaging in that and getting more information and connecting with that. So that again comes into capacity. So communities that are interested and engaged will have more data and providers.
So is there outreach to those organizations, or do those organizations come to you?
Both.
Both. There's outreach through the HLC, and Ben is the sole entity at the moment. Pro is seeking to invest, or COIC is seeking to invest, but yes, it's a two-way street for sure.
And I think the host team, Deschutes County host team, they do assessments in Sisters sometimes too, like if.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, the Deschutes County folks
Yeah,
do, for
they do,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, the more
So
providers
what would
we
you
have.
say of the services that are out there, what percentage are plugged into the system?
That can be a really big challenge, in that sometimes folks are not interested in engaging unless they are required to. So engagement for extra work with no money behind it is hard to ask sometimes. So that's where we maybe put that in it on your plate and ask that they start to participate so we can collect better data and.
So we
tell a
need
better
to come up with a carrot for why it's a
Yep.
good idea.
Yeah, right now, all we have is a stick for some of those people, and
Okay.
creating and incentivizing this work. It's one of the biggest challenges with Built for Zero and the by name list and coordinated entry is where is the incentive?
Are some of the grants, like if they're applying for grants, do they
Yes.
need to be, so that's kind of an incentive, right?
Yeah, we try. We try to dangle that carrot, but thank you.
Okay.
So this slide is kind of covering each of these core elements and what Central Oregon has at the moment. So for access, we have a coordinated entry hotline that is staffed Tuesday and Thursday.
Who staffs it then?
Our providers, so it's a rotating hotline that rotates between JBRJ, Neighbor Impact,
Reach. And we can use county.
County,
Yeah.
And
they can also be assessed in person through service providers. And then those assessments, whether it's on the hotline or in person, all gets entered into HMIS, the data system.
do we have data on the number of calls received on these 2 days and those small timeframes?
I don't, I know that
We have
On
access
here.
to it.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see.
I would say that the majority of assessments though that go into the system are like in person. Yeah. So like I'm an outreach worker, I'm already build rapport with this person and I'm doing the assessment. And that we're more successful with that because the person knows the outreach worker.
I'm wondering if the people calling the hotlines are the ones trying not to become unhoused. I think that's my thought, is that when they're reaching into the coordinated entry system, they might be a domestic violence victim. Or
Yeah,
they might have just been in that, oh, I've got a notice of evict because they're selling my house and now I can find nowhere with my money, and this might be where they start to reach out.
yeah.
It would be interested to see, because they're
Yeah.
not working with anybody at that point.
So are other hotlines aware of this number? If they receive a call?
Like 211 or
Right,
Okay, so what is the number so we can put it into the record?
I have it in my phone.
Yes, please. I mean. I would think that number.
Yeah, how
could
do
be
people
really-
find out about this number?
Yeah, that would be,
Where is it?
this would
The
be a good
HLC
venue
website on
to,
the coordinated entry page.
So they have to have access to
Is it
it.
coordinated?
We've also like printed flyers, things like that, like during different times, they're posted in different places because.
So is it a
providers.
541 number?
Yes.
630-2533, I believe.
Somebody call it and let us know. What is today?
It's not-
Thursday. Oh, at 12.
In 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, somebody's gonna be answering it in 9 minutes. 541-630-2533. Please, if you know someone that needs some help, this is a number where you can leave your information. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 12 to 4. Okay. Ben, anything else on this page?
yeah, I'll continue with assessment, so the
Because we are
assessment.
running out of time. There are other
Okay.
people that need to.
I'll speed through it a little bit. The assessment is just the instrument we use. Right now we use the BIs for that, but we're working on a new assessment tool, kind of piloting. Prioritization, we have several lists that kind of are focused on our motel shelters and rapid rehousing. And then we also have a call on Mondays that it's continuum wide for service providers to call in and collaborate on clients and make some of these referrals in kind of a meeting setting. This is from the LSA, which is a longitudinal data set, so it's all the data from here, but I just kind of wanted to look at our flow within the our homeless system and kind of drop in these points, core elements for the coordinated entry system. So accessing, entering into the system, being assessed, and then being put on a priority list, and then finally referred to different services or resources.
Can I make a comment? So how he was saying, like, looking at this in reference to like the point in time count, it shows that 1,909 households were served in the homeless system during that time. So when you look at like how many households were served, there may be multiple people in households. So that's like a more accurate representation of folks experiencing homelessness in the community, or at least people engaged in services.
So is this the Deschutes number, this page, or is
This is the
the region?
continuum wide.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the
region,
three, yeah.
okay,
And I can confirm that the coordinated entry number is correct.
Thank you.
great. All right,
What's HH?
household,
Household.
Household.
So there may be like
more than one or two.
more than one
Got it.
people or children in.
That was my first question, but thank goodness you answered it immediately. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, this is my last slide for coordinated entry. So some of the challenges we have. There's a bit of an access bottleneck with, the limited hours and days. Fortunately, our providers are very good at doing these in person, but if we want to expand that access, having expanded hours would be one way to do that. Right now, our data quality, through no blame on providers, there's a feedback loop that we need to close with coordinated entries being open, and then there's been kind of a gap in our staffing. And so right now, some of our by name list and listings have essentially people who are probably inactive, but we need to close that loop, close those folks out so that this list is only those who are active. That's a little challenging because we also don't want to close out someone who's active and make them enter the system again. So that's a bit of a challenge. Training resources for staff and providers, just we as the data leads need to create some more sustainable training materials rather than relying on just a single person to do in-person training, like making videos, handouts to kind of walk people through this process to improve that data quality. But that depends on, again, our staff capacity. And then also one of the challenges is sometimes there's a lack of options, so that once you're in the system, there's not much movement, or you know, it's hard to see what's happening behind the scenes when there's not resources to move people onto or refer people to. So a lot of times that process stops at getting put on a priority list and then, you know, being there for quite a while. So, and I think that would also serve as a more of a carrot for onboarding with providers. If providers know that their clients have access to more resources than what we currently have, I think that would help with incentivizing onboarding into this system.
We definitely see a direct correlation between resource availability and participation in the system. So that comes into play with the by name list as well, and that engagement. If there's not resources available behind that assessment, why am I bothering to participate? That's the question from the participants and the question from the providers as well. So that is the chicken and egg question that even Built for Zero struggles with. So.
Great, thank you so much. We do need to go on. Roger Moore, Molly Hess, do you want to take it for the housing placements in Central Oregon? Can you do it in like 5 minutes?
Sure.
You were allocated 1 second. You were allocated 10, so.
I can go short, so you guys can have a little bit of extra time.
Okay.
The conversation.
I'm just trying to.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, it's a lot to get through.
Yes.
Sorry.
And yes, Clackamas is going to be postponed until a later time. They were not available today, so that's the really good news. So I'm not quite as bad as you might think.
Okay, very good.
Just semi bad.
You're gonna.
Yeah. Okay.
So, real quickly, I thought I'd give an overview of where we're at with affordable properties in Central Oregon. Now, what I'm talking about today isn't inclusive of all.
Could you introduce yourself again?
What's that?
Could you introduce yourself again, please?
Roger Moore with Epic Property Management.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So this is a snapshot of the affordable properties that Housing Works, local housing authority owns. So I'm going to give you some data points real quick. So of those properties in Central Oregon, there's about 40. We have about 1,300 units. The waiting lists at each of those properties are between 1 and 2 years long. They would actually be longer, but we close them after 2 years, so that way it doesn't create a false list. And then we open it up whenever it gets below 1 year. We average about 150 move-outs over the course of a year. And Housing Works has been actively building right around 100 units per year. Now, you know, when they design these new properties, it's very intentional. Most of the properties that they have built and are building are for folks that are at 60% of the area median income. And we also put together set-asides at most of those properties so that we partner with service agencies. So that folks that may be fleeing domestic violence, or we work with Mosaic for some mentally, not mentally, but some physically and mentally folks that need shelter. And we have 5 to 10% of each of those properties designated for folks coming out of that homelessness that is assigned to those services, those agencies, and that process works really well. Now, the reality is, over time, the current residents, 45% of our current residents are below 30% of the area median income. But they're living in properties that were meant for 60% of the area median income. 33% are between 31 and 50% of the area median income. So you put those two together, and that's over 75% of the folks in our housing are deeply rent burdened, even though that they are in affordable housing.
Do you have this information written down?
I do, yeah, I can
Yeah,
send it
really
out.
helpful.
Yeah, because you're throwing out a lot of good information and I.
Yeah, I'm trying to be fast.
Okay, no problem, but I
Can
just,
you please give this as an attachment and Chris will send it out to the group?
oh, that was,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Scribbling here.
So 17% is between 50 and 80, and then 5% is over 80. All right. A lot of these folks are coming out of homelessness and into our properties, right? But you know, as the design, we partner with service agencies to help stabilize those households coming out of homelessness. What we're seeing now is most of those folks coming out of homelessness in our properties are not aligned with services. Now, in order to be able to wrap your head around the AMI percentages, right now, HUD just came out with the new percentages for Deschutes County. We're at a median income of 104,700.
For a family of four?
That's just median income of family of four. And then at 60%, they can make up to 62,820. And the IRS says that we can have rents all the way up to 1,633 for that 3-bedroom apartment. HouseWorks doesn't charge that. It's right around 1,000 to 1,100. But as I said before, the majority of the folks that are living in those 60% units are below 30%. So that means that most of them are making under $30,000 a year. And really, they should be paying around $800 a month. So their rent is double what 30% of their income is.
And you've noticed so that Bend is now approaching like 10% of vacancy. And I just drove down to Empire. I saw lots of signs, of course, move in 2 months free. But then again, you know, if you have to go back up to the 2,400 a month, that's not going to help you even with 2 months free. But I do believe that the market is feeling the pressure and there's a lot of vacancies, not in Redmond, but in Bend.
Yeah, but not in affordable housing, but yes.
No, but I'm saying that there
market.
is pressure on the market when I've heard of apartment buildings that were like 2,000, 1,900, and they have been vacant for a long time. So those owners are undoubtedly going to feel that pressure.
Absolutely.
So if we're building properties, let's just use Midtown Place and Redmond as an example for 60 to 80% AMI, but we're putting 30% AMI people into these units, where the 60% AMI people.
That's
going
the
to
great
rent.
question.
Yeah,
And
right.
they are probably rent burdened in the market.
And so I'm, because my mind is wrapping around this, but we built this for this, but we decided somewhere to do.
No, it's
Why?
just, we have an open waiting list and we do it by time and date, and those are the folks that are applying. And so yes, we have to rely on the market in order to be able to solve this problem. We need to come up with some type of a landlord engagement policy to help mitigate any risk that the landlord would take on in helping us with this solution. And to go further down that rabbit hole, Molly has a lot more information around placements.
Well, I was gonna take Chair Adair's cue there and just speak to, I'll stop, Molly Heiss, ex officio Crow board member from Neighbor Impact. Served in the housing realm for a very long time. I'm now the Deputy Executive Director of Community Services at Neighbor Impact, still overseeing the housing team. So I wanted to speak to a little bit of a cautionary tale around those vacancy rates and give you all a narrative, maybe when you're getting pushback from constituents around that. several or most of these vacancy rates are over market rate resources. Like you said, Patty, you've got two-bedroom apartments from 1900 to 2400. Those are most likely what's included in those residential vacancy rates. That's probably the majority of that. As Roger shared, that Epic's properties are not included in there. I would be curious to know if Viridian's affordable housing was included in there, but Epic's properties are not included in those vacancy rates.
Because there are no vacancies, right?
Yeah, basically.
Right, you don't have enough.
And when we look at affordable units and we look at those AMI percentages that Roger was speaking about, affordability is relative. The National Low Income Housing Consortium just released their gaps report. That's a very interesting document. I haven't had time to fully digest it. I just got it, came across my email 2 days ago. They have a lot of information about affordability in there. So I'm happy to forward that to Chris as a resource.
Excellent.
Sometimes when we've got folks that are visibly unhoused, then there's an urgency from the public, just house them. And so I was going to speak to what that does to the resources available to our region. There are definitely resource limitations that come into play here. For example, our continuum of care subsidy grants, both for rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, which are meant to serve our unhoused population. Those rental assistance line items are directly calculated using fair market rents. So the amount that we get in that grant for rental assistance is dictated by fair market rents. And for example, the 24 FMRs for Deschutes County, a 2-bedroom is $1,623. That's the max, and that's where that allowable expenditure or rent charge comes from. But when you look at the $2,400 2-bedrooms, those are not necessarily calculated. So then if we've applied for serving 33 households and we're utilizing that just house them mentality, and we're serving them with we can pay using those grant funds to get them housed in those $2,400 a month units, but then we're over that FMR line capacity by $600, $800. So we're chewing up the subsidy faster. We're not making our commitment to the funding entity around how many households we're slated to serve, which then puts us at risk of being non-competitive in future, and it puts those resources at risk of leaving Central Oregon. Additionally, what that can do is when folks exit from so the rapid rehousing program in the continuum of care is a time-limited program, up to 24 months at least. If we're housing people in that just house them mentality, and we're putting somebody in a unit that they have no way of supporting at the end of program, there are so many households across Central Oregon that could never afford a $2,400 a month housing payment, whether it's a mortgage or it's a rental payment. So when we look at that and we've got people in program, we've housed them, we've worked with them, we've created sustainability, they're maybe not able to attain a professional job or income level, they're our line staff. When you look at that and these people have to exit, sometimes they can exit into an affordable unit. You put them on all of Roger's wait lists the minute they get into housing. Ideally, they will be able to transition. But if they aren't able to transition and they end up back in homelessness, that impacts the entire continuum's service or performance measures and puts us at risk as an entire continuum. When you look at the Housing Choice Voucher Program, those are also based in fair market rent. So we are operating with a HUD system that's approximately 5 years behind in terms of actual dollar amounts. We're funded based on those. The expectation for the Housing Choice Voucher Program is based on that. If you had somebody that you had in a subsidy program and they were over that limit, that payment standard limit, and they received a housing choice voucher, they couldn't transition in that housing onto their voucher. They would have to seek additional housing, which is not available because Rogers wait lists are 1 to 2 years long, as are most affordable housing units. So this creates it creates an exit back to possible unhoused situations, impacts the system in a very negative way. The other piece is that private landlords have always been one of the solutions that we've leaned on as providers to kind of talk to them, tell them, like, sell your program and your supports, your housing retention capacity with that household. And Senate Bill 608 and the impact of COVID have really, really decreased the appetite for risk, no matter how big their hearts are, in leaning into this population. They're still recovering from the impact of both of those things that happened, boom, boom. So I think that this is such a huge topic and such an important topic that we likely need to come back and dig further into this and come up with those out of the box solutions. I was thinking that, you know, there are opportunities for peer learning here. Central Oregon is just such a great place to live that everybody, you know, the market is driven by that influx of folks, and our housing stock for this particular population with this AMI level of capacity to pay, you know, that we don't want them rent burdened at 60, 80, 100%, which is what we're seeing. Puts them at risk. It destabilizes affordable housing communities. It overburdens the system so much that it's and it snowballs. So that was my main point, but I think we should circle back to.
No, we definitely should circle back, Molly. It's a huge issue. I was just speaking to someone from Shepherd's House last night, talking about the fact that the rents are available, you know, vacancies at 10%. And he's saying his staff was having such a hard time. And I go, well, you need to negotiate with the landlord that's actually out there and a little suffering, and your people are working. And, you know, we could really dig down deeper into the numbers and come up with some more solutions. So,
and Roger and I would love to dig into that more. We just didn't, we knew 10 minutes or 15
Right.
minutes.
okay, great.
So
It sounds like we will be digging some more. We're really good with shovels here. So we'll be, that would be great. Chris, do you have time now to do your update?
I'll keep it short and sweet. Chris Ogren, Houseless Response Analyst with the Coordinated Houseless Response Office. I'm here to just provide a really brief update about the request for qualifications process. So we've received 7 applications. All of the applicants were local. We have received applications 4 for safe parking, 2 for tiny home villages, 1 for a managed camp. I'll just put this out there. Some of the applications have significant challenges. Things like zoning, things like cost, expectations of partners, and also provider capacity. All applications are either utilizing private property from the city of Bend, or property from Deschutes County. The total requested amount, and this is both one-time startup requests and what the need would be for a recurring need for 1 more year, is approximately 4.5 million if we were going to try to fund everything through 2025. There's
Ended 2025.
Yes, that based on what has been submitted so far. The review team that's reviewing and scoring these applications this week is comprised of a representative of the city of Bend, a representative from the city of Redmond, 1 from COIC, 1 from Deschutes County, and 1 from the Homeless Leadership Coalition. And folks are reviewing applications this week, and we're meeting next Tuesday on the 30th to discuss scores. And we're hoping to share recommendations from that process with the board in early May on who should move forward into phase 2 of the process, which will be a more in-depth request for proposals. Are there any questions about things we've received? I can't get into too many specifics yet because I don't want to bias the scoring, but I'm happy to answer any general questions about the process.
Any general questions today? Okay, we don't want to.
Looking forward to it.
Yes.
Perfect.
And thank goodness, thank you to those 7 service providers.
Willing
Yeah,
tip their
willing to step up. So appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Chris. You actually used your time very wisely.
Thank you all.
We do now have Josh. We're just here in the room, and I believe Alex was on Zoom.
Yes, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. I'm Josh Burgess. I'm the director of the Central Oregon Civic Action Project. Thank you very much for having me today. I am a Central Oregon resident. moved to Bend with my family after my wife and I both retired from military service. The Central Oregon Civic Action Project, or COCAP for short, aims to help build more thriving and inclusive communities by creating more innovative and accessible pathways to civic engagement. And we try to align that with many of the strategic plans and strategic objectives of our partners here locally in government and CHRO included. Our objectives are to help bridge social divides, to rebuild trust in government institutions, and to improve governance outcomes through increased opportunities for civic engagement for all members of the community.
Those small feet.
I mean, why not think big?
Okay.
And that takes us beyond the usual stakeholders. There are so many people in this community who are involved in so many ways, which is tremendous, more than anywhere else that I've ever lived, but it still leaves the vast majority of the community unable, for whatever reason, lack of resources, to be able to be involved in policymaking decisions and implementation. One of the methods that we're most focused on right now are citizens' assemblies. These are, and I'm gonna really cut this short, so there will be probably some questions that we can answer later on. But in essence, we go out to the community, and using a variety of random selection and demographic sortition, we put together a small representative group of the demographics of the entire community. In this case, Deschutes County, because we want to work with CHRO. That representative group comes together for 60 to 70 hours over the course of a couple of months to learn in depth about whatever the challenges are. We're focused on a number of different topics, learn from people with lived experiences, learn what has worked, what hasn't worked, what policy issues are in play, and then deliberate on potential solutions, to Molly's point of finding some innovative out-of-the-box solutions potentially, but also to help prioritize what members of the community broadly would like to do. And then provide those recommendations back to government partners. Our long-term goal here is to do multiple citizens' assemblies here in the local area, to broaden those out across the region, and make this a sustainable public-private partnership. Our partners, our core partners, are a nonprofit based in Europe, actually, called Democracy Next. There have been about 800 of these assemblies done globally over the past decade, not very many in the US though. And so we're leaning on them for their expertise, best practices. Our next core partner here locally is Oregon State University Cascades, the laboratory for the American conversation, who's helping us understand better how to engage with all parts of the community, urban, rural, across political divides, socioeconomic divides. They're also going to be doing some research to ensure that our efficacy is in line with what will make the resource expenditures worthwhile for everyone. And our third partner here online with us is Healthy Democracy, an Oregon-based nonprofit who's pretty much the foremost practitioner of citizens' assemblies in the United States right now. And she's going to be able to provide a little bit more detail on how these things actually work. But we also have our collaborative partners here. We've done a tremendous amount of work with support from the city of Bend, city councilors, Deschutes County, and the commissioners. We're not yet and have not yet been out to other municipalities in CAD, and Jim, I'm so happy to see you here because we want to get out and meet with you as soon as possible as well. We are, as I said, really keenly focused on aligning with your strategic objectives, in particular public engagement, which is something that this is a very effective way of reaching out to members of the community that don't necessarily have access. And the topic that we have chosen for our first assembly after hundreds of discussions over the last 9 months, including with our service providers and others in the room, has been to focus on the challenges of unsheltered youth in Deschutes County in particular right now. And I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Alex for just a little bit more detail on how these work. Thank you.
Alex.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you to the CHRO for having us here today. Josh took most of the words out of my mouth. I'll be very brief to honor your time and be able to answer a couple of questions, hopefully. So again, as Josh mentioned, I'm the program co-director at Healthy Democracy. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit that designs and coordinates these kinds of programs. We work all over the country, but we're based here in Oregon. And over the last 15 years, we've run dozens of these programs with local and state governments, all using the basic tenets of the Citizens Assembly model, which is demographic or a democratic lottery, which essentially gets a representative sample of folks in the room using random but demographic accuracy according to the population data, and then using deliberative processes that are highly facilitated and structured to get that group of people, usually reaching far beyond the usual suspects, to come together and find really creative common ground solutions, typically with supermajority agreement, and then present those directly to decision makers. And time again, we really see that given these right conditions, so an extensive learning phase where panelists are hearing from stakeholders and background presenters of all stripes, often dozens of them in a process, and time, typically these processes last for at least 4 days, often more. Everyday people are incredibly capable of communicating across their differences and making decisions together on really tough issues. And they produce really sophisticated proposals, even on really highly technical policy topics. As Josh mentioned, this has been used all over the world. It actually dates back to the 70s in the US, but recently we've fallen behind our international colleagues. And but more and more, at the local and state level, even in the US, it's being seen as a promising new way of doing democracy and solving tough local challenges. So a bit about why we're here today. It's mostly just to introduce the concept and answer any questions you have. We're also in the process of identifying 1 to 2 public bodies who could play the role of a convener for the process. So that includes things like being a recipient of the Assembly's recommendations and providing some minimal staff support, especially to advise on certain political decisions related to the local landscape. We've been in conversations with COIC, with the City of Bend, with the county, and given the priorities of this group and your current strategic plan, including engaging with the whole community as priority 1, we think that there's a pretty natural synergy between the CHRO and the goals of the Assembly project. So we'd be really delighted to partner with you. And with that, I will step back and take any questions.
Are there any questions today? We actually have no questions if you want to use public testimony. Okay, Alex, thank you. And if there's some information that you want to send us so that we can have it distributed with our adjusted packet, that would be lovely.
I'll get that to you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Okay, so now we actually are down to public comments. You're allowed 3 minutes. It's 12:23. So do we have public comments in the room? Catherine?
Yes.
Would you like to come up?
Sure, do you want me to go here or do you have a preference?
Oh, it's fine.
Here.
That corner looks really good on
This
camera.
corner's really close. Hello, thank you for your time today. My name is Catherine Osborne. As advised, I will say anything I say after this is not the opinion of the city of Redmond, Redmond staff, or Redmond City Council. These are my personal experiences that I would share with you today in hopes of sharing my voice and the voice of an unhoused community member in Redmond who is feeling like her voice is not being heard. And so I come to you as a coordinated houseless response office because you are the experts in solving this little problem we have of Redmond not feeling like they're being heard. Or maybe it's a misinformation or like I've heard many times today, we've had some issues of staffing and money and etc. But one of the things I heard, for instance, was Roger saying with the property in Redmond that it's a list, right? And it's who's next. Doesn't feel that way, especially when on January 29th, Midtown Place posted that the housing gave priority to homeless veterans. I want to house homeless veterans. I really hope they have a good time on the swing set at that property. However, that was not the point of that property when it was put in place by Downtown Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. My voice is shaking right now because I'm about to talk to you about a friend, and this is very, very hard. My dear friend is 62 years old. She is a single disabled woman in Redmond, Oregon.
She works full-time in our restaurant industry and she was volunteering with our veterans at the Legion Hall when she, through numerous things that were no fault of her own, including domestic violence, loss of a HUD voucher, the housing crisis, etc., became homeless, living in her sports car in the middle of winter with her dog Maisie, who I love. And we, being the educated people we are, turns out I wasn't, felt I knew where to go and who to go to because of the things I've learned in these different positions with urban renewal, my own volunteer work in the homeless camps and on city council. We contacted everyone we could think to contact, and it was the fourth person that she met with till someone finally realized she had not been added to the HMIS system. Although I heard today it just takes one point of contact, I can tell you that's not what happened. Also painfully and heartfully, something I want to bring up, this is not an attack, this is my personal experience. I tried to get her into Bethlehem Inn because 2022, when that opened, I was so grateful to have something like that in my community. And even this morning, it was posted by Portland State University that that is the way to go with these motels. She called, they weren't open yet. They said she needed a referral. She called back. She asked, how do I get the referral? We couldn't get answers. I figured she's under a lot of stress. I'll call. Maybe she's not understanding. I'll have her call back on February 1st, 2024, same information. Sorry, I'm going over, but I'll talk faster.
It's okay.
Same information, we need the referral. And I was like, this is confusing. I'm calling myself on February 1st. This time I identified myself, I used my title. This an unfortunate thing I had to do, but I was trying to explain that this didn't make sense because they were telling her she had to drive in and they weren't asking her her name and she's supposed to be in a system. When I identified myself that day, I was told there actually wasn't a referral program. The building was full. It was now going to be transitional housing. Great, my friend is in the same parking program. That's transitional housing. She lives in a car. They're full. Okay. I don't know what to do. I drive by that hotel now 2 to 3 times a day. It's on my way home. I see the same cars in the parking lot, which is not many at all. I see signs asking for like oatmeal packets. But if I drove by a house 2 or 3 times a day with 13 people living there and multiple people working there, I would assume I would see someone, and I see no one. What I do see is my friend who has no house, who's been homeless since December, who is disabled and working full time. And I come to a room with a group of people who I know really freaking care. And they say words that sound so good. But sometimes you sit in a meeting and it just starts to sound like words. And you start to ask, what is the definition of serve? We've served so many, we've housed so many, because I know so many that it's not serving. So I'm asking for your help, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Okay. Gwen?
My name is Gwen Weisling. I'm the executive director at Bethlehem Inn, and I too have read the study from Portland State University, and we are proud to have shifted into the birth program that we currently are providing in Redmond. And in that transition, we understand that there is additional investments required, and we are beginning to see the positive results. We have had one person move out this month, and that has been 100% successful into housing. So what we are doing is working, and as planned, we are moving into our phase 3 in that program, where we're sending out referral packets to our referring agencies. So we'll be able to work with those individuals that are connected, and those agencies are the Revenant Service Provider Group, many of whom are here today, Homeless Leadership Coalition, and our long-standing partners that we are working with for eligible individuals who are experiencing homelessness and interested in entering into this program. A similar packet of information is then also going out to our selection committee, who will be reviewing applications, which all have been de-identified giving a standardized application and able to score those and send those in to Birch for our program staff to contact and make intakes. It's taken some time to make certain that we are doing this with fair housing in mind and with understanding of those individuals who are seeking that help in our community, so we can provide this. And I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other raised hands? Ed?
Hi, my name is Ed Muir. I've been a resident of Penn for 7 years now, and well, for the last 2 years, I've been carefully tracking the sources and uses of funds that have come in for homeless operations, and it's now approaching $40 million. One of the things that has me extremely concerned is there's no accountability for this money. The one that came up just recently for the Old Mill Inn and Suites, which was bought for $4.5 million by a private organization. And then they were given a back grant to another group for $5 million. It's not clear what that money is going to be used for. It actually took me a while to figure out who was actually getting that money. It turns out it's a group up in Portland that's getting $5 million, so it's not staying local, which is concerning. But I would greatly encourage the Homeless Office to start to do an audit on some of these bigger chunks of money that are going out. It's not clear to me what are the uses of that money, where that money is going. And it's very concerning. When there's no accountability, things tend to go awry. And so I'm concerned that we're getting the best use out of the money that's being granted. I have no problem with granting money for homelessness, but I want to make sure it's been put to the right use. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Any raised hands online? Okay, do we have a meeting date for next month?
Next meeting, it's on May 18th.
And that's not my budget meeting, is it? Whitney?
No.
Okay, May 18th?
It's the 16th, actually.
Okay, May 16th, that sounds like a winner. Okay, everyone off the top of your head, you think that might be okay? Well, look at your calendars later and let us know.
I've got budget that day, but I'm sure we'll be done by that time.
Okay, all
We'll
right,
get it.
because we have the next whole week is our budget, so the 16th actually is good. So any other business? All right, meeting is adjourned, only 2 minutes late.